Yo, Adam.
Yes.
Have you heard the interview?
So are we talking about the film where those two actors went to North Korea?
No.
Are we talking about Rick Beato and Keith Jarrett?
Exactly.
Yes. I'm Adam Maness.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear podcast.
Music commentary, advice, and conversation coming at you.
That was on the fly. That's an improviser right there. He just made that
That's
shit
how we
up.
do it.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm excited. I'm inspired.
I'm inspired too. We're sponsored by Open Studio. Go to openstudiojazz.com if you want to go on a deeper dive of anything we usually talk about here.
If you want to jump, is that like we are actually jumping off the deep dive, or if we're jumping off the low dive into the deep end?
No. At Open Studio, we take you out in a boat in the middle of the ocean. You can't see land. There's no land for miles.
Right.
And then there's a huge trench, the Mariana Trench. That's a thing, right?
Yeah.
we pull that boat over the trench, with piano and music.
Yeah.
And then we dive super deep.
No, we throw them off the boat. And there's a bunch of sharks around.
We weigh you down with theory.
Are like our various jazz YouTubers that we won't mention.
Oh boy,
circling around you, and then we throw you a life vest, a life. What's that? The circular thing, the life
preserver.
That's funny. It doesn't preserve; it saves. A lifesaver.
Well,
we throw you a packet of lifesavers.
Okay.
Which is an Open Studio membership, in fact.
So go to openstudiojazz.com for more information.
But you know what, Adam? We don't talk about this enough on here.
I feel like we do.
No. Open Studio is the sole sponsor of this here podcast.
True.
And the reason that you don't hear about a bunch of other random MeUndies, big shout out to MeUndies, but random sponsors, is because we like to talk about music. We like to have commentary. We like to have discussions about music, things like practicing and Keith Jarrett and all these wonderful things. And so as you will hear the podcast unfold, and if you are new here, welcome in on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this or watching it. We pretty much go straight through because that's the way we like to do it. We don't want to be hawking a bunch of stuff, but we do hawk a little thing called Open Studio membership. What are you most excited about? Because every week there's something new about the Open Studio member experience that I'm amazed by. Sometimes it's a member showcasing their talents or a story of progression. But what's kind of been striking you?
I mean,
recently?
There's so much to be excited. I'm still excited about my course, Hearing Great Harmony, which just was released a couple of weeks ago. I still get daily feedback from our members on that, which I'm super stoked about. It's all about understanding sort of the nuts and bolts of the harmony of music, and I'm digging people's reaction. And I'm excited about bringing on new instructors like Jeremy Siskin. We've had Jeremy over in Open Studio Pro for a while. We're talking with Jeremy about a possible course at Open Studio, so I'm super stoked about that. I'm super stoked that we get to talk to people like Ron Carter and
that was fun.
It was really good. So go to openstudiojazz.com to learn more. But today, Peter, this has been an interesting weekend.
Yes.
I've listened to more Keith Jarrett this weekend than I have, I think, all year so far, because friend of the show, Rick Beato.
Yes. Former guest on the show. Yes.
And of course, famous, amazing YouTuber. Music YouTuber. He actually reached out to you a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And he told you that this was going to happen. So we kind of knew that this was going to be released here.
Yeah, I was keeping very quiet about it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted I was so excited about it, and we talked about it, and so there's been anticipation. And, I think that Rick really did a wonderful service in terms of, just like what you were saying, how it led you to listening to Keith Jarrett. That was myself. This is the kind of video and interview that just leads you back down that beautiful place.
Let's set it up here. So Rick interviewed Keith Jarrett. And now for you, those of you who don't know, Keith Jarrett retired from playing in, I believe it was 2017. Does that seem right?
2018.
2018. After a couple of, I think he had one or two strokes that left his left side paralyzed. So he can't play with his left hand. And so he retired from playing, and he hasn't really done too much. I haven't seen a lot of interviews with him or heard a lot of interviews with him or read a lot of interviews with him. He's been kind of quiet.
Right, exactly.
So this was kind of amazing, especially to have video of Keith, especially have the video of him at the piano,
playing
the piano. was amazing. So maybe we could start with one of those clips.
Well, and I was thinking I might even just kind of throw this up there, which is this video here, the most beautiful 2 minutes of music.
Oh, yeah.
I believe this is what led this one here to this interview happening because, and I highly recommend, we'll have links to both these videos in here, but this is a video that we'll just watch a little bit. Should I get some sound going? We'll even jump back to the beginning here.
Has perfect pitch.
But basically,
of how to start it. The video is called The Most Beautiful 2 Minutes of Music. But this 2 minutes of music actually happens 34 minutes into a 64-minute improvisation. I want to just say this right now. I promise you, if you sit through my little introduction, it'll be completely worth it when you...
And it is. We're not going to go into all this to see it, but you can check this out. But this is the video that led to the interview happening. That's kind of why I wanted to show it.
Someone on Keith's family?
I guess it was either Keith or his wife or his manager or something saw it and showed it, and Keith got to see it and was really intrigued by that, and it kind of led to an invitation.
Subscribes to YouTube channels.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he does, but it just shows the serendipitous but sometimes purposeful, I think, connections that music commentary and music sharing and that YouTube and certainly this online medium can make that I think is super exciting. I mean, look, it goes back to the same thing like with radio and then records and all these kinds of things, but there's sort of an immediacy and a connection that's really just very joyful and tender in a lot of ways, but also, I mean, I imagine Keith Jarrett sitting and somebody presenting and then him seeing, kind of getting a view to maybe how
other people see him.
Other people see, like we talked about this with Ron Carter, where it was like he was sort of surprised during the pandemic when he started looking at YouTube and it's like, wow, everybody's talking about me on here. I've just been,
That's nice.
Yeah, that's nice. And so they have a view that's very different than all of ours in terms of how the appreciation for what they have.
So let's set it up a little bit because we obviously we're not going to watch the whole Rick Beato video, although we do encourage you. I'm sure most people that are listening.
48 minutes, and it's a I mean, you're gonna want another 48 minutes.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, there's a good chance that you already follow Rick and you've already seen this video. But we can talk about a few of our highlights here. So Rick went up to Keith's home, and Keith has a barn, famously.
His studio,
his studio barn behind his home. Where he has, pianos and all kinds of instruments and space. It's a recording studio.
Right.
And Rick talks to him about that process that he made that studio in the 70s out behind his house.
Right.
And why he did it. That's fascinating.
Yep.
But I think the most fascinating thing, Peter, and I know, you and I were talking about this, is seeing Keith play here. So again, he's lost the use of the left side of his body, so he can only play with his right hand. But he does some playing on this video.
Right.
And it's really good.
It's really, really good.
Like, it's better than it has any right to be.
It's Keith.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just with one hand and the musicality there. I mean, I was so inspired by seeing this because I'd been hearing, we'd all heard about, it's been public knowledge about the Strokes and that the reporting has been also that he couldn't play or wasn't playing at all. That's what I was hearing for years now. And so you start to, you start to really appreciate, obviously, everything he did up to a point. But then when you see that he is still playing, he is still Keith, the music is still there. He's never going to be apparently as he was out concertizing, or maybe he will. I mean, people have had recoveries, whatever. But just to see the human and to make that connection. So we're going to check out. Should we go? No, we're going to go here. Can we do that? Bam. So this is a part. Well, let's just let it play.
How you're getting back to doing some playing.
I just come in here and I doodle around. I would have to call it doodling.
How do you have to adapt then for playing with as far as accompaniment?
So I got to go back to that line because there's all this great key.
Yeah.
We could analyze this,
So much good
but
stuff.
those that know his music, like there's a lot of little things in there. But like the way that Keith swings, which is very much in here, is so like it's so hard swinging, but it's so personalized.
Yeah.
Like all the great players, just very much linked to the way he phrases. Obviously, master. Finger technique just off the charts.
You can almost hear the rhythm section with him or his left hand.
Oh, yeah.
As that he's playing off of something. Something is there.
Yeah.
In
Well,
the
his
room with him.
time.
Yeah,
like I was going back and checking some stuff on the solo piano stuff, obviously the trio stuff, the quartet with Dewey Redman. I mean, like his time is so good, and so that is so relaxed here, but. But I mean, that's just like very, very bebop, but. All right. He kind of looks over like, you dig? You catch that?
Yeah.
And who knows how much concentration and energy more he's needing to put into doing this. I mean, it still has that effortless sound.
Seems fairly relaxed.
Yeah. So, I don't know, man. It's just fantastic, and to be able to have this, I love what Rick did to bring him to a place where he was comfortable to do this and to play like this. Because we haven't seen something like this from him for a long time.
Yeah. Before we get too much into how great it is to see and hear Keith, we should shout out Rick for this.
Yes.
He did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Not just with the interview, but with the entire setup and the sort of story behind it.
Yeah.
I think this is one of his best videos, at least for us. I mean, I know this is our wheelhouse, but
yeah.
He's Rick is obviously now like such an experienced storyteller at this medium that I couldn't imagine a better choice for someone to do this than him. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think it helps that Rick is a just lifelong fan and really knows Keith. We've talked to him about that before. That's what I actually talked to him on the pod here when he was on a couple of years ago, and it's like he comes from that place of knowing his music, coming up during that time, being a fan. But I would just encourage folks as you watch this. Some people are going to be a little bit off put because there's like a really long introduction before the interview starts.
No, it's good though.
Don't skip over that part.
It's worth it. Yeah.
I mean, and especially because this, I think, is going to be a great interview and kind of check-in point for folks on Keith Jarrett that may not know the history. Like, so even if you feel like, oh, I know all those records or whatever, the kind of background that Rick does at the beginning is great. Maybe we'll skip up to this part. Let's see here, where it's with some just cool stuff where he's talking about triads versus fourths and this kinds of things that I'd never heard him talk about.
And I said yes. Jack and I shared that ability that we remember words.
Oh, it's a little bit further. Okay, all this stuff is great. I mean, it's just here we go.
As a pianist, I was more interested in. I mean, I guess I was Bachian.
Yeah,
Bachian.
a lot of counterpoint.
Yeah.
The movements of the inner lines that you were playing.
Yeah, that was what I did the most of. For example, the tune "Country" is a good example of what I was thinking when I was thinking of a kind of simplicity.
Okay, we have to stop there because we can't play that. But "Country" is like just incredible. Was kind of a big hit for him. This record, "My Song," of course, is incredible. And even that, I don't know if there's any video footage. I remember seeing this years ago on, like, somebody had a VHS of this. I tried to find it at one point on YouTube, couldn't find it. Keith Jarrett played this song on SNL in like 1978 or 79 or something. Yeah. 78 is when the record was, probably around that time. An incredible solo piano version of this. So like this was really something interesting that he talks about. But afterwards here, we're going to skip ahead a little bit because he gets into really, sort of talking about and describing his approach.
American approach,
which I'd never really, I know he had the American quartet, but I'd never heard him talking about this and demonstrating it. This is Ryder.
I would say you're right. I think it's American.
Yeah, and no one was doing that.
No.
This is your own language. Steve Swallow with Gary Burton, and that language, they kind of adopted that. And then later on, Pat Metheny did too, this Midwestern thing. Now, being from Allentown is kind of like being from the Midwest.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Would you agree?
Yeah. It's a church-related thing.
Yes. And Charlie. So Charlie's
And
thing.
Charlie, yeah.
And honestly,
Charlie
Ornette's music has that,
Yep.
I don't want to say country. Is it country elements to it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have called that song country if I wasn't thinking of it.
Right.
I love that. That was very that's Keith right there, which is great. But
so what he's talking about here, maybe we can just break down a little bit musically of the sound that he's talking about.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different, there's two main cadences, right? You have your perfect cadence, which is how to approach a tonic from fifths, right? So like a C7 to an F, right? Obviously, that's like the main sound of Great American Songbook standards. It's also the basis for like a 2-5-1.
right.
And it's not like Keith never did those, but what he did that you don't find in things like Gershwin tunes or Jerome Kern tunes or those sort of like Great American Songbook standards, and a lot of the jazz from like the 50s are these plagal cadences that are built in fourths. So
Did he plagalize them?
He plagalized them. And Jacob Collier actually talks a little bit about this too. So if that's the perfect, right? G7, C7, F, right? Moving in fifths down, or like everything has a fifth. This is the sound. It's really the sound of the 70s, isn't it? When you hear this. So imagine doing the same thing, but from fourths. Right? So resolving to that F from B flat, and then resolving to that B flat from E flat, from a fourth up instead of from a fifth up. So this becomes, it's just a different way to get to that place. And I think Keith, with those, I think that's what Rick is talking about with his originals, and even into the standards later that you'll hear them talk about. He uses those plagal cadences more than anybody did before him, certainly. I think that's part of his signature.
Oh, it's great. So there's so much great stuff in there, and right even before this, he talks about more about this American style, and it was super exciting to me because it's like the type of thing that I'd always heard. I mean, you talk about coming from Facing You, and certainly before too, but like Facing You, his first ECM record, classic solo piano, where he gets into all these great vamps, there's all this improvised stuff, and then Cone concerts, My Song. I mean, so many great, I'd always felt these connections purely through his music and never really heard him talk specifically about it as much as he does here. Certainly not in a video interview, but to hear him kind of affirm something that theoretically I understood, like the way you're explaining it, and could kind of play some of it, or at least be able to identify, but to hear it sort of brought together as a thing is super exciting to me. And I think the way it's a very interesting and organic way for us to experience music. And what's so fun about music theory or commentary, when you don't think about it in advance, it's not like, oh, I want to learn how to play the American style. It's more like, oh, I've been hearing this thing, and then you get a label for it afterwards. You're like, oh, yeah, that is what that is.
Well, it's funny they talk about country as the label for it, because to me that sound, and especially when I hear Keith play it, it's more of a Black American church sound.
Exactly.
I mean, I know it's in country as well, but I feel like it came to country from the church
Well,
first.
I think when he says that's why I called it. But Keith's not thinking about, especially at that time, and I'm putting my own opinion on this. This is no I could be wrong on this, but I think he's not thinking in terms of country, like country and western or
so what talking about the region.
Genre. He's thinking of something that's even in jazz when we talk about.
This is why labels are bullshit.
Yeah, that line was so country the way it's like freedom of expression and a certain connection with gospel, really, and blues. That's country a lot of times. But then the industry thing of country is like some Nashville dude in a pickup truck. That's a different thing. But there is overlap there too, I'm sure. Yeah, that's not what he's talking about.
Actually, look at that. That's a plagal cadence. It's there.
But then he gets into the next segment we wanted to kind of show is something that's really cool here. And it's basically Rick is playing him Solar, Miles Davis Solar. So this is more like a jazz standard, which with Keith was great with solo piano, with trio later, in addition to the Great American Songbook. But like this is a Miles. Is this actually Miles' tune or is it somebody else?
It's credited to Miles, I believe.
It could be Bill. I mean, it could be Wayne. I mean, who knows? But anyway, yeah, it's Miles. But the idea is like, Keith apparently had never heard this before, and they talk about that. This is from a concert that I used to have a VHS of live in Japan from like the mid '80s. I think it was at Suntory Hall, and I always remember it because Keith's wearing like what we used to call shopping mall Reeboks, which now are apparently very much back into the vanguard. I believe producer Caleb is actually wearing a pair now.
Actually, but Caleb's kind of dressed how Keith is dressed in this video almost completely.
Exactly. So it's come full circle, but this was a very mid 80s kind of look. But anyway, it's just an incredible concert. It was recorded, and I remember when I first saw this, I was like, oh my God, this is HD or whatever. I thought it wasn't, but it was some of the best video and audio.
540p.
Yeah,
whatever.
It was just some of the best quality I'd ever seen. But apparently Keith had never seen it, so Rick sat him down, and sat him down. They were already sitting down, but was like, I want to play you something.
Keith, have a seat.
Have a seat. I know I'm in your home, but he played him this, and it's so fascinating. At first, I was like, oh, this could go off the rails. Could Keith be like, why are you playing this or whatever? But it's just
reaction
fascinating
to it. He doesn't remember this at all.
Yeah.
This is your version of Solar, okay?
Oh.
He says, oh.
It's from a live concert.
So Keith's here, at first I'm thinking he's gonna be like, yeah, whatever, but he's listening. This is such a great version too.
Fourth there on the melody, really good.
He's like, yeah. Appreciative in the most just peaceful and direct way, the same way we are, I think.
Standing up here. Yeah. He's standing up if you can't see this video.
And apparently Keith was just listening to this. He wasn't watching it like it's on. We can see it on here now, but he was just listening.
He looks like he's digging it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all digging it.
Yeah. And he's kind of listening like we are.
I know.
It's like, his reaction is at the same time,
It's objectively amazing.
Yeah. We could go on and on here. It's just to say that like this, that whole performance, which I hope is available now. Again, I'm not exactly sure if this is where this is located, but the whole concert is just fantastic. And to see Keith like responding, like we're saying, like he's
digging it. He's into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people, there's a lot of stories about.
There's a lot of people that don't like to listen to their own stuff. First of all, so that seems out. This seems like out of the ordinary. That
right, but sometimes it's a lot of kind of maybe false humility when people I
think it might be.
Not with me. I don't really enjoy it, but I mean some things I enjoy listening to.
No, I know some people legitimately can't. It's just too much, right? Like they don't want to get in there.
And the fact that he had never heard this or didn't remember it, or obviously he doesn't seem like he's sitting around his house listening to stuff, his own stuff.
He's not. Yeah.
But then also Rick plays him this wonderful piece that I'd never heard before with the towards the end of the video. I mean, they listened to like this whole thing that he had written for the Eastman wind ensemble or orchestra that he played with. It's a beautiful piece, and I think that. Keith really in the same way like with this just is appreciating it. And I love the fact that he's just listening, like he's very objective seeming to me. It's not like, oh, look what I'm doing. It's like he's always been very much about the music, obviously, but it's been off-putting to a lot of people, because especially some musicians, because he's very specific about like his demands on the piano. I mean, it's legendary, the stories and the audience.
Look at who his main mentor was in music. It was Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Right. Miles Davis also gets flack for having this confidence of like, listen, I'm doing some stuff here. I know what I'm doing is interesting and good and different.
Yeah.
I know it's at a higher quality level than almost everybody else, if not everyone else.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to fake that. I'm not going to pretend like I don't know that.
Right.
It's part of why it's so strong and powerful. And I think
Right.
Keith sees that same power, has that same kind of power that Miles does, where it's like, listen, I know what I do, you know, and I know that this is good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. And I mean, Keith gets into talking some about a lot of people think he doesn't care about the audience in the same way they used to say about Miles, right?
Yeah, they said the same thing about Miles. Obviously cared about the audience. He's trying to make the best music possible for them.
But I think that they both were coming from that place, and Keith has talked about this, and talks about it a little bit in this interview. He talks about the importance of the audience and how they're part of the process, and I think that's his thing. Why it's like, come on, let's have the sound in a certain way. Let's not take pictures. Let's honor this time together. Not because it's like, look at me. It's like, listen to the music.
What did he say? Something like, what you might not know is I couldn't have done this without you, or something like that? It was something like that?
Exactly. He's in there. And then he talks about, so much great stuff in this. Check out the interview.
Yeah, watch the whole thing.
The Deerhead Inn, he talks, I didn't realize I knew that he has those great recordings from like the early 90s or early 80s?
I don't know.
Live at the Deer. Oh, man, some of the greatest trio stuff.
Man, I have so many. He has he was such a prolific recorder.
Yeah.
I have so many holes. Another great thing.
And they show his prolific recorders on the wall.
I know he's got literally recorders. Yeah.
The bass recorder.
No, so one of the things with this interview, and I think one of the things that's great from other things that Rick Beato has posted on Keith, is that this is basically like a listening recommendation.
Yeah.
For a lot of, especially 70s Keith, because Rick is obviously steeped in 70s Keith, all Keith, but you could tell Rick is that's the emotional connection of him as a young musician discovering this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, for me, this has been a playlist essentially all weekend, and I can't wait and I mean, I've heard of this stuff and heard this stuff obviously, but really going deep, being inspired by hearing Rick talk about it, being inspired by seeing Keith. So if you're sort of like a superficial Keith admirer, or you have a one gear of a Keith Jarrett fandom, check out especially the beginning of the video, for some great Rick Beato recommendations on where to start for this stuff.
And I mean, I think it's such one of the difficult things with, especially with so much being available now, and in terms of his entire output, for such a prolific and multi-talented artist like Keith Jarrett, where it goes everywhere from solo piano to duos, trios, classical. Man, his Mozart piano concertos are some of my favorite readings of that. Handel.
He's got his second album is like a singer-songwriter album.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff. Of course the recording. I think most people know him for Forest Flower with Charles Lloyd, which was super early on. He has a really huge output, and it can be. And then there's all these great live recordings, a lot of which kind of come and go, but they're available on YouTube, like stuff from the 80s and the 90s.
I mean, his stuff from the 70s 2000s is hard to classify.
Yeah,
it's just amazing music.
But it's such important stuff. And then he's even talk about Live at the Deerhead. That's a great one. We'll listen to that. But he did these Live at the Blue Note. I remember in the 90s.
Live at the Blue Note.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of sound in the Blue Note, but somehow those recordings in him.
Man, that band sounded so good in there.
So great.
I think it must have been because it was kind of small for them. They must have been tight. Within each other, super close to each other. Because they're usually that trio with Jack and Gary are playing these big halls. Is how I associate them.
Yep.
That's how I saw them.
Yeah.
But Live at the Blue Note, that must have been amazing to be there.
Yeah. So I've seen Keith twice, and one of the times live was, I'll never forget. I mean, there's always these moments that come along, but being a big fan of his, coming up, I remember seeing him, and this was kind of maybe 96, 97 at the Istanbul Jazz Festival. I stayed over an extra day because we
just
played,
to watch it, yeah.
And and I was gonna kind of hang backstage, and before he got there, they were like, everyone has to leave backstage. He can't have, he's got these little things, But I was like, whatever. So I went out and sat in the audience. I knew the guy, the festival promoter, because we'd played there, and anyway. It was with the trio, with Gary Peacock and Jack DeJohnette, and it was such an amazing concert, to be able to remember sort of what the vibe was, and to see, especially with a group that has so many great live recordings. So you go into that situation kind of with a certain expectation. You don't know exactly what's going to be played, but you have an idea about kind of what it might be like. But so it's almost harder to sort of surpass that, but it did, like, to be in something that's, it's like if you go to see a sporting event and like you've seen it on TV a lot, you kind of know the players, their moves and everything. But then when you see it live, it's sometimes very hard to transcend your expectations. But this did, and
Same.
that's exciting.
Same. I saw him in a big theater in Newark, New Jersey, probably 2002. And, I still remember a couple of moments of him playing a chord from that concert. And it was just like, how do you play a chord like that?
I know.
Like, how can a chord just like resonate your whole body?
Una corda,
man. Anyway,
Una
thank
corda.
you, Rick, for that video,
Rick Beato.
and thank you, Keith. I'm hoping, man, that with this renewed interest, or that with some interest, maybe Keith gets a little bit of a urge to make some kind of recording in there of a right-hand album. That would be amazing.
with the trio, even if not with the trio, but
Whatever.
certainly with
just hearing what he was doing there, I could listen to that for
absolutely
50 minutes.
Yeah.
All
right. Well, thank you guys for making it all the way to the end of the video. We remind you, we are no, don't stop listening now. Don't stop. Look, even you got your hands on the dial and everything over there. I know this is
would that be something you might be interested in?
I'm just ready to go here. Wherever you want to go.
We are sponsored by Open Studio. Please come and check out our community. It's an amazing place. If you're looking for an inspiring, supportive, interactive community in order just to get better playing music, getting better play jazz. We're always talking about jazz, but jazz is really the foundation for getting better just musically. It's not the only foundation, but it's the easiest, most fun, and bestest, as we like to say. And I know we have built the number one meeting place for just great artists, great teachers, great tutors, great students, great community of jazz artists. And we're really excited. We have a master class with Keith Jarrett coming up this Friday. Did you know about that?
Sorry?
No, we don't. I wish we did, though. We're going to try to do that.
We do not, by the way. We do not.
Yeah. No, but it's an idea.
But Keith, if you're watching.
Yeah, that's right. Until next time.
You'll hear it.
I'm in Steamboat Springs, Colorado currently.
I'm in Indianapolis.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Andrew, hi.
Because I feel inspired to play something else from your playing.
Okay, that's great.
I think using the metronome is a great tool, but it's not the only tool.
All of the answers are really in the music.
What does it mean to live in a groove, be in a groove?
Until next time, happy practicing.